Saturday morning, Metro and the FBI searched a home near Washington and Hollywood for a possible biological laboratory. Investigators finding refrigerators with vials containing unknown liquids inside the garage. There have been a lot of questions as to what.
The point here, Mugo, is that Vegas home that police just raided this past weekend has an LLC. According to county records, it actually matches the California home, which they raided 2 years ago. Officials say they did find a biological lab inside that home.
Our teams went inside and found evidence of possible biological material, including refrigerators with vials containing unknown liquids. There's a lot of questions that we have.
The castle wasn't on any tourist map. It sat above a frozen Alpine road, behind 2 miles of private forest, guarded by cameras disguised as bird boxes and motion sensors buried under snow. For years, locals called it the retreat. The FBI called it something else, a containment site. And when the first tactical team breached the Iron Gate just before sunrise, they weren't looking for treasure, drugs, or weapons. They were looking for people. 122 names, 1 burned VIP list, and a man nobody could prove existed. The first thing agents noticed was the silence. No dogs barking, no guards shouting, no alarms echoing through the valley. Just the crunch of boots over ice and the low thud of a battering ram striking a door that looked like it belonged in a museum. Inside, the castle was warm. Too warm. The marble floors were polished. The walls were lined with oil paintings. Classical music played softly through hidden speakers. It looked less like a crime scene and more like a private wellness resort for people who paid too much money to disappear from the world. But then one of the FBI agents stepped into the west corridor and saw the first camera. Not pointed at the entrance. Not pointed at the hallway. Pointed at the bedroom doors. That was the first sign that this place wasn't built to keep people out. It was built to keep people in. The operation had started 4,200 miles away, in a small FBI field office outside Denver. At first, it didn't look international. It looked like a missing persons pattern. Young adults, mostly between 19 and 34. Some were students. Some were tech workers. A few were struggling with addiction. Others were children of wealthy families who had quietly dropped out of public life. Different cities, different backgrounds, different reasons for vanishing. But the same strange detail appeared in file after file. Before disappearing, each person had attended a private clarity session. That was the phrase. Clarity session. Not therapy. Not recruitment. Not treatment. Clarity. The sessions were run through a nonprofit registered in New Mexico called the Meridian Circle. On paper, Meridian offered trauma recovery, meditation retreats, advanced health studies, and spiritual leadership programs. It had IRS filings. It had lawyers. It had clean websites with soft colors and smiling testimonials. But no one could find the founder. The public face of Meridian was a calm woman named Celeste Ward, a former crisis consultant from Washington, D.C. She gave interviews. She spoke at wellness panels in Los Angeles. She appeared beside university donors and hospital board members. But in internal messages, members almost never called her the leader. They called her the gatekeeper. And the person behind the gatekeeper had only one name. Aster. No last name. No photograph. No voice recording. Just Aster. The first real break came from a mother in Phoenix named Lena Morales. Her son, Daniel, had vanished after flying to Munich for what he told her was a medical research retreat. Daniel was 26, quiet, brilliant, and newly sober. He had been accepted into a 6-week program that promised neurological reset therapy using sound, light, nutrition, and memory processing. The cost was listed as $0. That was what disturbed Lena. Her son had no money, no passport stamps before that year, no connections in Europe. Yet someone had paid for his flight. Someone had arranged his visa assistance. Someone had sent a black car to his apartment at 3:40 in the morning. 3 weeks later, Lena received a message from Daniel's phone. "I'm better now. Don't look for me." That was it. No emoji. No follow-up. No voice note. Lena knew immediately it wasn't him. Daniel never wrote don't. He always wrote do not. It was a tiny detail. But federal investigations often begin with tiny details that refuse to die. The FBI's Denver office pulled Daniel's travel records. Then they pulled 3 more. Then 12. Then 37. By the end of the second month, analysts had identified 68 missing people who had direct or indirect contact with Meridian Circle. The DOJ opened a sealed investigation. The FBI brought in cybercrime. ICE Homeland Security investigations joined because of international movement. The DEA joined after several victims' toxicology histories showed unusual prescription overlaps. Then the CIA's involvement came through the back door. Not because Meridian was a spy operation. But because one of the shell companies funding the retreats had previously moved money through an account flagged in a foreign intelligence assessment, that single account led investigators to Luxembourg, then Zurich, then a private aviation broker in Miami, then to the castle. The property was registered under an Austrian holding company with no employees. That holding company was owned by another company in the Cayman Islands. That company traced back to a trust controlled by a dead Swiss banker. On paper, the trail ended with a man who had been buried 9 years earlier. But the payments didn't stop. Every quarter, money kept moving. Maintenance invoices, medical equipment, security upgrades, cryogenic storage contracts, pharmaceutical shipments labeled as research material. The castle had no licensed clinic, no hospital registration, no research approval, no listed patients. Yet someone was ordering enough medical supplies to run a private laboratory. That was when the case changed. It was no longer a cult investigation. It was a human containment investigation. And still, nobody knew who Astor was. The raid took months to approve. Agents couldn't simply storm a castle in the Alps because American citizens had vanished. They needed cooperation, warrants, evidence, and a way to stop the target from wiping the site clean. So the FBI built the case from the outside in. They tracked logistics. Food deliveries came every Tuesday, but only enough for about 30 people. Fuel deliveries came twice a month. Medical waste pickups were logged under a veterinary code. A private helicopter arrived every 6 weeks from a small airfield near Geneva. And every time the helicopter came, encrypted data traffic from the castle spiked for exactly 9 minutes. Nobody inside used normal phones. Nobody used public email. The building was mostly air-gapped, meaning its internal systems were isolated from the internet. But not completely. Because one night, a junior analyst in Quantico found a leak. A maintenance tablet used by a contractor had briefly synced to a cloud backup. Only 15 seconds of data uploaded before the system shut it down. But 15 seconds was enough. The backup contained a floor map. Most of the castle matched the historical blueprints. The east wing, the library, the chapel, the guest quarters. But under the south tower was a second structure that didn't exist on any public plan. 3 basement levels. A private elevator, a medical suite, server room, observation rooms, and one area labeled only as Dormitory B. That label changed everything. Because Dormitory B implied there was a Dormitory A. And if there were dormitories, there were occupants. At 5:18 a.m. local time, the first interior team reached the old chapel. The chapel had no pews, no candles, no altar. Instead, the floor had been reinforced with steel plates. 6 biometric locks were mounted behind what should have been a wooden confession booth. One agent pulled the false panel open. Behind it was a keypad. Another agent found dried blood along the bottom hinge. That was the first visual moment that stayed with the team. Not the size of the castle. Not the weapons. The hinge. A tiny brown line on polished wood. A quiet sign that someone had tried to get through that door the hard way. When the lock finally opened, a narrow staircase led down into white light. The temperature dropped with every step. The music from upstairs faded. And underneath the castle, agents found the lab. It was clean. Too clean. Glass walls, stainless steel counters, white beds with restraint points, refrigerated cabinets, wall-mounted screens showing body metrics from rooms deeper inside the facility. There were no doctors visible, no patients, no staff, just abandoned coffee cups and monitors still glowing. Someone had left in a hurry, or someone had been warned. That possibility hit the command channel immediately. A leak. Inside the operation, the FBI had planned the raid with a limited circle. European partners had been briefed in stages. Warrants were held until the final hours. But the lab looked prepared. Hard drives had been pulled from several towers. Paper files were missing. Chemical storage had been emptied. A burn barrel was still warm in a service tunnel. Inside it, agents found ash, melted plastic, and the metal rings of a binder. On the floor nearby was a single surviving strip of paper. Only part of a column remained. 3 initials, 2 dates, and the words, VIP observation access. That was the burned VIP list. And it meant the castle wasn't just hiding victims. It was hosting visitors. Back in the United States, the DOJ froze accounts connected to Meridian Circle. What they found was bigger than expected. Money had moved through wellness charities, private research grants, luxury real estate firms, and donor-advised funds. Some deposits were small, like membership fees. Others were enormous. $2.8 million from a consulting company in Dallas. $6.1 million from a biomedical fund in Boston. $14 million from a hospitality group in Las Vegas. None of them publicly admitted any connection to Meridian. But privately, investigators found invitations. Not emails. Printed cards. Cream paper. Embossed seal. No return address. The cards offered access to something called the Alpine demonstration. That phrase appeared in 3 financial records, and once in a deleted message recovered from a phone in Chicago. After the demonstration, you will understand why Astor must remain unseen. That line became the center of the case, because it suggested Astor wasn't just a cult leader. Astor was the product being sold. The deeper investigators went, the stranger Meridian became. Victims weren't recruited randomly. They were profiled. Some had neurological conditions. Some had trauma histories. Some had rare blood markers. Some had no close family. And some came from wealthy families who had paid Meridian for healing programs, without realizing the same organization was selecting vulnerable people for something far darker. One victim, Maya Chun, was a graduate student from Seattle. She had joined a mindfulness study after losing her younger brother in a car accident. Her roommate told agents Maya changed almost overnight. First, she became obsessed with Meridian's language. She stopped saying "I'm tired" and started saying "my system is resisting clarity." Then she gave away her winter clothes. Then she emptied her bank account. Then she vanished. Months later, a postcard arrived at her parents' home. It showed a mountain lake. On the back, in Maya's handwriting, were 7 words. "I consented before I knew myself fully." Her father kept that postcard in a plastic sleeve. He gave it to the FBI without speaking. That sentence appeared again inside the castle, printed on a wall in dormitory A. "I consented before I knew myself fully." Below it were 32 beds. Only 9 were occupied when agents entered. The people inside were alive, but weak, disoriented, and unable to give clear names. Some believed they had been there for days. Others said months. One man asked whether Nixon was still president. That was impossible. He was 29. Medical teams moved fast, wrapping survivors in thermal blankets and guiding them through the underground corridor. One woman refused to leave until agents promised to turn off the speakers. She said the music told her when to sleep. That was the human impact no financial chart could capture. Not just missing bodies, stolen time, stolen memory, stolen trust in their own thoughts. But the biggest shock came 2 levels below. Behind a sealed gray door, agents found the server room. Not a dusty basement setup. A professional data center. Black racks humming in cold air. Backup power. Fiber lines. Drives labeled by number instead of name. One wall had a live dashboard. Subject groups. Compliance scores. Sleep cycles. Sponsor access logs. The word sponsor froze everyone who saw it. Because sponsor did not sound like doctor. Sponsor did not sound like priest. Sponsor sounded like customer. Cyber agents imaged what they could before the system triggered a shutdown. Someone had built a dead man protocol. If the system detected unauthorized access, it began destroying keys needed to decrypt stored files. But it didn't erase everything. One folder survived. It was labeled Orchard. Inside were hundreds of short video files. Not public videos. Observation clips. A subject sitting alone in a room. A subject answering questions. A subject being shown photographs. A subject signing forms. And in several clips, voices could be heard behind glass. Not staff. Visitors. One voice asked, "Can you make loyalty permanent?" Another asked, "How much?" Personality loss is acceptable. That was when the case crossed from criminal conspiracy into something colder. The lab wasn't only trying to control bodies. It was trying to measure how much of a person could be rewritten before they stopped resisting. Then came the mid-twist. Astor had not built Meridian from the outside. Astor had once been inside the federal system. The name surfaced through an old personnel record tied to a subcontracted behavioral research program from the early 2000s. Not CIA staff. Not FBI. A private analyst. Real name, Adrian Voss. Born in Portland. Educated at Stanford. Later attached to classified adjacent contractor teams studying coercion, trauma response, and group dependency in high-risk populations. Voss had disappeared from official life after a misconduct inquiry that was never fully resolved. The allegation was not espionage. It was unauthorized human experimentation. The inquiry file had been buried under contractor privilege, sealed settlements, and national security language broad enough to swallow daylight. After that, Voss vanished. A year later, the Meridian Circle appeared. That changed the motive. This wasn't a mystic guru who stumbled into crime. This was a trained behavioral architect who rebuilt himself as a spiritual figure because spirituality gave him something institutions never could. Voluntary access. People came to Meridian willingly. They signed forms. They gave medical histories. They confessed fears, addictions, secrets, family trauma. Then Meridian used that trust like a map. Astor didn't need to kidnap everyone. He only needed to convince them that surrender was healing. but the 122 missing victims showed where persuasion ended and captivity began. As survivors were flown for medical evaluation, agents searched the upper floors. That was where the castle revealed its second face. The public rooms were designed for guests. The dining hall had seating for 24. The wine cellar had bottles worth more than some homes. The library shelves were filled with books on theology, neuroscience, intelligence history, and elite philanthropy. On a desk in the North Study, agents found a guest ledger. Most pages had been torn out, but pressure marks remained on the page beneath. Forensic teams used angled light and chemical treatment to recover partial impressions.
Initials, room numbers, arrival dates.
Several names matched donors. One matched a university trustee. One matched a former pharmaceutical executive. One matched a political fundraiser from Virginia. Nobody wanted that list to exist, and someone had tried to burn it before the raid. The question was who warned them. The answer came from an unexpected place.
Not a phone, not an email, a calendar invite.
A DOJ analyst reviewing internal access logs found that one sealed warrant summary had been opened 12 minutes after it was filed. The account belonged to a senior liaison officer assigned to coordinate international evidence transfers. His name was Martin Kell. He had no obvious connection to Meridian.
No strange deposits.
No luxury purchases.
No offshore accounts under his name.
But his daughter had attended a Meridian grief program in 2019. She had died 6 months later.
Official cause, overdose. Kell blamed himself.
Meridian found him at his weakest point, then fed him a story. They told him his daughter had not died from drugs. They told him she had transitioned. They told him Astor had preserved part of her consciousness inside the work. And for years, Martin Kell passed information because he believed he was protecting the only place that still contained his child. That was the corruption twist.
Not just greed, grief.
Weaponized grief. When Kell was arrested, he didn't ask for a lawyer first. He asked if the castle had been damaged. Then he asked whether the servers were safe. To investigators, that told them everything. Meridian's most powerful weapon was not fear. It was meaning. It gave people a story so painful, so personal, they would betray reality to keep it alive. But even Kell didn't know the final truth. Astor was not in the castle during the raid. He had left 36 hours earlier. A helicopter had departed under medical emergency clearance, routed through a private clinic outside Innsbruck. The passenger manifest listed one patient.
No name.
Just biological transport. For 6 days, agencies searched across Europe. Zurich,
Milan, Prague, Marseille. Every airport, every clinic,
every shell company property. Then a facial recognition hit appeared from security footage at a train station in Lyon.
An older man,
gray beard,
surgical mask,
walking with a cane. At first, the system gave only a low confidence match, but a CIA analyst noticed the left hand. Adrian Voss had lost part of a finger in a lab accident years earlier. The man in Lyon had the same missing section. French police moved in. By the time they reached the platform, he was gone. But in a trash bin nearby, they found a burned passport cover, medical gauze, and a handwritten note. It said, "Identity is the easiest prison to escape." That was Astor's final message. Or maybe his final performance. The public never received the full list of names tied to the castle.
Some were charged, some were questioned.
Some vanished into sealed proceedings. Some claimed they had no idea what happened below the chapel. But the survivors told a different story. They remembered masked visitors watching from behind glass. They remembered being asked whether pain felt more meaningful when someone explained it. They remembered signing consent forms after days without normal sleep. They remembered Astor's voice, calm and low, telling them, "You are not being broken. You are being simplified." That line appeared in recovered training documents.
It was underlined, simplified.
That was the philosophy.
Remove fear. Remove attachment. Remove memory. Remove resistance.
What remains, Meridian believed, could be shaped. The FBI's final case summary described the castle as a coercive medical behavioral facility operating under religious, therapeutic, and research cover. But even that language felt too clean. Because what happened there was not just a crime.
It was a system.
A system that used non-profits to recruit,
medicine to legitimize, money to protect,
secrecy to scale, and belief to silence anyone who started asking questions. Lena Morales eventually learned that Daniel had survived. He was one of the 9 people found in Dormitory A. When she saw him for the first time, he recognized her face but not her name. She sat beside him in the hospital and read old text messages out loud until he cried. Not because he remembered everything, but because he remembered enough to know something had been taken. Maya Chun was never found. Her name was listed in the Orchard files. Her final status was marked transferred.
No destination, no date, no explanation.
Her father still keeps the postcard.
The castle was sealed.
The lab was dismantled. Meridian Circle's websites disappeared within hours of the raid becoming public. But copies kept surfacing under new names, new language,
New retreats, new promises, not Meridian, not Asta, something softer, something cleaner.
something ready for the next person desperate enough to believe healing should hurt. And that is the part investigators could never fully close. Because the castle was only a location. The real machine was the network around it. The donors, the recruiters, the doctors who looked away, the lawyers who polished the paperwork, the insiders who believed the lie, and the people powerful enough to make a list burn before anyone could read it. In the end, the FBI found the hidden Alpine castle. They found the lab. They found survivors. They found proof that 122 missing people were not isolated tragedies. They were connected. But the one person at the center of it all walked out before the doors came down.
Adrian Voss. Aster.
The anonymous leader who convinced people that losing themselves was the price of becoming whole. And somewhere, maybe under another name, another retreat is already accepting applications. So the question isn't only how a place like that existed. The question is how many people had to benefit from it before anyone was allowed to see it. And if a system like this can hide behind trust, charity, science, and status, what else is still waiting behind locked doors?